Heyo, Scott Cook here again with another episode of Kerbal Space Program, my long-term space program. Not short, but long. I got a lot to talk about in this episode. We've got lots of stuff coming to the moon, lots of stuff we got to put together at the moon, stuff we got to drop to the moon. This episode is going to be a lot about the moon. And I know it seems like we've kind of focused on this attention, but that's the first step in a long-term is basically colonizing the closest bodies and moving outward. As you can see here, I've got the giant gas tank coming in right away, as well as the big rig, which is carrying the docking collar. I'm going to have to circularize them here pretty quick. So we just speed up, and once I get to the point, I'm going to use the gas can, using the Kerbal alarm clock to notify me when I need it. As you can see, I'm using the arrow spikes on the front of this one just because they are higher thrust. Therefore, they will slow me down a lot faster than the nuclear engines, and with the wiggle and the wobble of the gas tank, it was quicker and easier. That's part of the reason why I designed these vehicles with retro burn options. I got a lot to talk about in this episode because we get a lot of stuff done with regards to finishing off the colonization of the moon and getting most of the equipment out there that I'll need to basically start making this viable, start pulling fuel out of there, and start using it for more of the program going forward. Now, I've also got a lot to talk about because I mentioned that I was going to Texas for a vacation here, and I just got back when I'm recording this, so I had an interesting experience, and I'll probably talk about it here when we get going. So now we're just finishing the circularization, and I do put a little bit of thrust into my tank here because I overcompensated when slowing down. I got a little higher, and I want to put the moon space station at about a 30-kilometer orbit. It's higher than it needs to be, but I kind of feel that it would be best suited there. And here we come in retro burning the big rig with the docking collar in it. So once we get this sucker circularized, then I have to do some inclination corrections, and we can put her together. This will be awesome because once you have the station here, then I can start bringing more vehicles. And if you remember from previous episodes, I also have a fuel hauler carrying a moon truck with it that's coming in. You'll see that later in this episode as I bring it into circularization. At the end of the episode, I'll have the space station for the moon together, and we will go from there for the following episodes. Now, while this is working here, I'll talk a little bit about my vacation in Texas. Now, if some of you guys that are watching this show are fans of the Chris Roberts Star Citizen Project, you were aware that on Thursday, August 10th, 2013 was their 1-year anniversary, and they did this live broadcasted live stream of their CitizenCon festivities, and they released a whole bunch of new artwork and new contests that they're calling the Next Great Starship, and a few other nice little goodies that if you're fans of space sims, you should probably check out at robertspaceindustries.com. Now, if you caught the fact that I mentioned that there's a contest in there, it has to do with designing a starship for the game. And this is open to modders, modelers, programmers, pretty much anybody who can get up to a 3-man team going. And me and a friend are going to compete. So if you're starting to get used to the fact that I could get these episodes updated fairly quickly, I'm afraid I might disappoint you. Quite simply put, I've got to start focusing on that over the next little while. I'll still do the episodes as they permit, but, time is time, right? Alrighty, so just coming in now, if you remember from the last episode, this is the SSTO, the space plane that I designed to ferry people back and forth to the space station. It's coming in now. All I did, skipped over, was getting it on a rendezvous with the space station. So now it's coming in, and I'm going to dock it. We're going to park it here for the short term while I start moving Kerbals out of the space station. Now, I put the docking port underneath the nose of it simply because I didn't have a lot of options to put it in places, and I felt that putting it on the nose probably was the easiest way to do it. But that also kind of presents a bit of a challenge when it comes to actually maneuvering it. I'm using B9 Aerospace RCS thrusters, as you can see there, on two sides of the fuselage, and they're nice because they add a vectoring angle or a jet angle that isn't included in the stock ones. So they have 5 points of thrust on all four sides, and they also thrust outward. So again, it was a natural choice, and it worked out well because maneuvering this sucker from the perspective of a docking port that's facing down on the front of the nose, it would be really awkward with standard RCS profiling. But as you can see here, I'm coming in. I kind of get the hang of it. We've got to do a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of everything we can here just to kind of get it sorted out. And getting it perfectly orientated would actually be a bit of a challenge. So I'm not too worried about it. I'm just trying to get it in on the docking port so that I can park it here. Just coming in again using that mod from Navy Fish. The docking port alignment really comes in handy for this kind of stuff, because this would be an absolute nightmare without it. Just coming in carefully here. It won't take too long once I get the hang of it. Then I'll just gas up enough fuel that I need to actually bring this thing back down into orbit. And the truth is, I probably have enough fuel in it to deorbit it and then safely fly it back to the KSP Space Center. But for the most part, I'll probably do some moving of fuel around, because I will need thrust in the side engines to get enough energy to actually keep this thing in the air. I did some testing with it, and I believe that all 4 jet engines on their own would not be enough thrust to keep it airborne. However, if the center one, I still haven't tested that. So when I bring it in for re-entry, I'll move some fuel around so that I know that I can fire up all 4 engines, or all 5 engines, so that I know that it'll fly. And then I'll just see if running it on the center booster presents enough energy to just fly it home, or if I'm going to need the 4 engines on the pylon. Anyway, we're coming in, a little bit of bounce, and connected. There we go, space plane on the space station. It's kind of ironic that the space plane is almost as big as the space station. Anyway, that's good enough. So, coming back to the moon, we've got to deal with maneuvers again, this time bringing the orbit, the apoapse of the orbit down to 30 kilometers so that I can get the space station approximately where I want it, so I can start rendezvousing the gas can and the docking collar together. And then we have a space station. We have a point of start and finish, and I can start ferrying fuel there and back. It's great. Alright, so this is going to take a few minutes, but while we wait here, I've got to talk about something. While I was in Texas, I got to go to the Houston Space Center. Got to see how NASA does things. It was pretty sweet. Now, most of you who have kind of been paying attention to the news lately knows that Curiosity landed on Mars last year, which is the rover they sent up most recently. It's about the size of a small car, and they had a mock-up in the Space Center about it. It was pretty sweet. But they found water on Mars, which is freaking huge. I mean, water has 2 base elements in it that we can utilize to survive on Mars, both oxygen and hydrogen. Oxygen is obviously necessary for our breathing, and hydrogen can be used as a source of fuel. Nice thing about this vacation was I got to go into mission control, and they were talking about it, and it looks like within the next 10 years NASA's trying to put a person on Mars, which would be pretty awesome. Now, that's going to be quite the mission, because it took them 6 months of flight time just to get Curiosity out there. Now, if you put a man, or even a few men, or women for that matter, inside a giant tin can for that long, I mean, they're going to have to be pretty tolerant people. I mean, it's going to be rough, so we'll see what happens. It was really cool going to Houston Space Center. I strongly recommend it if anyone is even remotely interested in rocketry, or space, or science, or anything like that, just to kind of humble yourself against the scope of how powerful these things are that break the Earth's atmosphere. Like, we got to stand beside the Saturn V rocket that launched, I can't remember what date it was, but this thing was massive. Like, they had to physically construct a building around it just to house it. Okay, so now I'm coming in here. I've got the gas tank getting a sphere of influence change, so we're just setting up, or the gas hauler, excuse me, setting up a sphere of influence change here with the truck on the front of it. I'm looking forward to getting this sucker down on the planet, because basically these are the last 2 pieces, and I can start ferrying stuff around. Any more stuff I add to the moon base or anything like that is just fluff for the most part, because these are the big components. If these here, I can actually make this viable. I'm also probably going to launch like some home pods and stuff like that, so we can get an actual community type thing going on there. But that again is not absolutely necessary to getting fuel off the planet into my space station where I can use it to do more interesting things, more planet transfers, that kind of thing. And we're just coming back to the space station here. I'm going to start moving some Kerbals around, get a few of them back into the SSTO so I can take them back and use them again for other missions. Should be pretty sweet. At this point, I kind of show again how bad I am at the EVA stuff. I think I just about lost one of them. We'll just kind of watch here and see what happens. For some reason, my camera was never really centering directly behind the Kerbal, which would have helped. I got to look into that at some point and see what happened. But anyway, we're bouncing around and zapping around and missing the targets, pushing the wrong buttons. Woo! Go, man. I think that's Bill. He's just having fun, I think. So, I get her back under control in a sec here. Just kind of... Ugh. I purchased a new mouse and keyboard to help with this because the old one I had was this wireless keyboard and mouse I've been using for probably 10 years, and it worked beautifully for all that time except for the most recent, when buttons would stop working and mouse clicks would randomly not happen and things like that. So I'm hoping in the next few videos my EVA gets a little better. Oh god, it's just awful. I can't even get over how bad I am at flying at this stuff. I can launch a rocket, but I can't maneuver a Kerbal. Go figure, huh? It's just funny. There we go, finally grabs the ladder. Sweet, and just move him down to the board of the vehicle. And who do I take next? Bob. Good old Bob. We'll take him and we'll send him back to this planet. He needs to go see his wife and his Kerblets, and because I'm sure he misses them. Now, I think I actually did a better job with him getting him over to the space plane. What a job. Anyway, spacewalking. Gravity. That movie that I watched, I think it was 2 weeks ago, was really good. I enjoyed it. Alright. I hope to do more kind of stuff like that in Hollywood, because it is an enjoyable show. And I mean, you see all these like science fiction that completely ignore the laws of physics, and they kind of break my suspension of disbelief a little bit because they don't take into consideration that. So anyways, moving forward with the game here, this is my Keythane can. That's all I call it. This thing is going to ferry Keythane back to Kerbal Space Center for me. Now, that's going to be the beginning of what I think I'm going to do, or I'm like tentatively calling my mini Keythane trials. There's some Keythane parts in the assembly building that, or the assembly, that you can't really test without Keythane to see how they work. So my thought was I would bring a load of Keythane back from the MUN and then drop it back at Kerbal Space Center, have a truck pick up that Keythane, and then I could fuel vehicles with Keythane at the Space Center and then do some testing to see how the components work. So, you know, I'll tentatively call this a mini Keythane trials or something like that, where I'll dedicate a video or two just to testing out Keythane parts and seeing how they work within the game. Because if I'm going to be using some of those things, specifically the Keythane turbine, I kind of got to get an idea of how it's going to work. Now this one I launched with air breathing engines, and I did my gravity turn a little steeper than I would normally if I wasn't using air breathers, again just to take advantage of them for as long as possible while they can still suck the oxygen. If you look in the top corner, I'm getting close to below 0.2 at this point, and that's when it starts getting dangerous for flare-outs. And again, I just do that just to take advantage of them for as long as I can. Alright, and then once they go, then I get my gravity turned back up to about 45 degrees and start trying to get out of atmo again. So this can is basically a probe with a big Keythane can, a couple of boosters just to help it maneuver while it's in space, some RCS, and a whole whack of parachutes. Getting it out into space is actually quite easy because an empty can only weighs about 10% of a full can of Keythane, and that's the same for fuel, I think, for that matter. So once it comes down, it's going to need a lot more assistance to slow down, simply because it's going to be 10 times heavier coming down. But for now, this episode, I only managed to get it up into orbit, dock it to the space station, and leave it there. Now there's only one senior docking port on this gas can, so I have to put it on the end of the space station with a senior docking port. It'll just stay there until I come back. I'll probably have my first Keythane ship there, haul a load of Keythane back from the moon here, and then it'll gas up and head out to minmus to start building out there. But for now, I just got to transfer some fuel back and forth. And I'm also shutting off the fuel tank so that when I do the circularization burn, those small tanks on the side do not empty, and they don't burn fuel from the engines. And the reason for that is I need to keep enough fuel in the top section there just to have enough maneuvering to get it to the space station. Now the big booster is also kind of calculated it out so that when I run out of fuel in the big booster there, it's just about circularized. Like we're only a hair lower. So yeah, I'm about 67 kilometers on the periaps there, and I decouple it. And then I use the little engines just to get that last little bit of juice. And I turn them on, but forget to turn on the gas tanks. So stuff happens. There we go. There, safe orbit. The gas can that carried it up, the old discarded stage, is still low enough that it'll start dragging in the atmosphere and eventually fall back down so I can recover it. So that's cool. And I just begin the rendezvous procedure to get it to the space station around Kerbin right now. But I'm going to be jumping forward here. We're going to go back to the moon. We've got to do some maneuvers with the gas can and the docking collar to get them on the same inclination of an orbit so that I can match them up. And then we can assemble them. That'd be great. So, just waiting to get into position here, and then we're going to burn to, I believe, yeah, my orbit's circularized. Yeah. So this one's actually because I still have a high apoapsy, so I got to bring it down. And then we do the inclination burn. So, my bad. It's been a mistake. I actually played this game before I left for vacation, and I just came back from my vacation to, put it together and video it up and get it out to all my wonderful subscribers, all few of you. Anyway, it's not like I'm doing these videos mostly to get views and subscribes. I'm just doing it because I enjoy it. It also helps me develop some of my skills of oral dictation and video editing and things like that. I always like learning new things. And because we're moving a huge can of fuel, it's slow and painful, as you can see. Nuclear engines are great, and once your thrust to rate ratio only really matters significantly when you're trying to get out of atmospheres, because if it's not higher than 1, you'll never lift off. But when you're in space, you can have very low thrust to rate ratios and you can still get around. It's not the end of the world. So just continuing here, we'll be finished this in a sec. The wiggle in this thing is just, it throws off the trajectory just a hair, but it's so visible. It's a lot of fun. Wiggle, 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 don't stop moving, baby, on a booty, drive me crazy. Anyway, so when I'm not singing really bad 90s dance tunes, I'm going to be docking my space can to the space station. Now, I was looking at it thinking, do I go in by the space plane, or do I go on the far end, or I could also go on either end, come to think of it. And I decided to go on the far end, just so I could get a really sweet flyby of it. So here we go, just cruising on by. I'm debating how long I'm going to keep the space plane at the space station. I might wait for some other Kerbals to come back from the moon, and then take them down and switch them out, so that we can kind of get a little bit of a crew rotation going on. I don't know how feasible that will be, because I mean, considering how many maneuvers and things like that I have to do, it takes more time away from progressing my huge space Kerbal empire and conquering all the planets. So we'll see here as it goes. I'll do a little bit of it just to kind of add a little interest, but for the most part it's not a huge priority for me. And we're just coming in. Still pimping that Navy fish mod. Love it. And I'll just come in, and I'm not going to worry too much about getting it perfect, just to bring it in, and then once I get it, I'll just disconnect it, and I probably won't actually get the key thing into that can until sometime in the next episode. I still have work to do on the moon before I'm ready to bring the one ship back that does all the key thing drilling and is self-sufficient for the most part. It's kind of my jack of all trade ship. I use it for a lot of stuff. It's usually the first ship or the ship that goes there first to any mission, manned mission, and then as you've seen in the first videos, I use it to refuel other ships that might need it in orbit, or basically be that safety net that the more expensive, more specialized ships are better for what they do, but the jack of all trade ones can be used in so many places and fill so many small roles. It'd be great. So there we go, docking. I'm just going to park it there for a bit. Back to the truck. Now we got to do a retro burn here. Basically, I was looking at my Delta V and I was worried I wasn't going to have enough to do a good burn, so I burnt a whole bunch of RCS and fuel. I used both just to make sure I could squeeze every last drop of Delta V out of the ship that it had, and it actually worked out well. With this one, I was able to finish its circularization burn with just a little bit of Delta V left, not enough to do anything more for the most part, but it was safe, it was stable, and it worked. As you can see here, I've got a few orbiting things here, and now I gotta do some inclination corrections and whatnot. So I basically picked the point at where they overlap and intersect and bring them both down, and that should be fairly close to the equator of the moon. Again, because the moon's orbit is perfect to the equator of Kerbin, I don't want to create an orbit of my space station that would require ships to do inclination and declination burns. It doesn't make any sense. For a place like Minmus, which is off kilter or has got a different incline, yeah, you might want to think about that. I mean, it just depends on the planetary transfers you're trying to do, right? Going to Duna and Eve and those places, again, you're probably not too bad. I mean, you can do whatever orbit you want, really. I just see it, if it's not on the equator, as me burning more Delta V just to get things to it. But you never know. I mean, if I burn all my kethane around the equator of the moon, it might make more sense to move my space station to overlap the kethane spots. And I'll have to play it by ear as we go. Again, this game's all about what you want to do. So here we go, correcting the inclination of the gas can. Again, long, painful burns, so I'm just going to skip ahead. They're not even that long or that painful. Whatever. Alright, so that one's about right. I'm going to go to the docking collar, I believe. So just taking a look, and if you look in the flight engineer on the side there, you can see the inclination is at 0.06, I believe, or approximately, or thereabouts. That's fine. A little bit is more than acceptable. Now back to the gas truck, and we have to circularize this, bring its periaps down, or bring its apoaps down. And again, sweating that Delta V because I don't have too much, but I had enough. I had just enough, and even had a little bit left over in case I needed to do corrections, because I had to do a slight inclination correction so that I could line it up. But yeah, I ended up with very little fuel, but I still got the job done, and I was quite happy. It was just worked out great. Have no complaints. You kind of get a feel for this stuff as you play this game, and I've been playing it since, I think I bought it early this year, like in February or March. A friend of mine recommended it to me, and so I gave it a shot, and honestly, it was the best $27 I've spent all year on games, by far. So I'm just checking. I think I got to do a slight correction because my periaps is a little lower than I wanted it. So yeah, still had enough gas left over to do slight maneuvering and get the inclination corrected. And then the gas truck is in a prime location to be picked up by the sky crane and dropped off. But before I do that, I have to put gas in it. So I think I end up having one of my service vehicles catch up to it. Anyways, we finally get to Minmus with the probe I launched way back, I think, in episode 1 or 2. And we finally got into the sphere of influence of the moldy green pea of the Kerbin universe. So I'm just going to be setting up maneuvers and circularizing it here. Using those ion engines is slow, but that's fine. And just time accelerating to get to where I want to be, and then pulling her up and switching her over and skipping ahead. We have a circularization around the Minmus. And then I'll just set up a maneuver node to circularize it. And I'm going to use the fact it's already on a really good inclination. Like, again, I want to do a polar orbit with this one. So the fact that it's on that angle already, like that good 56 degree angle, it's not going to need a lot of maneuvering to get it right over the poles, which will be great. And yeah, just kind of admiring it, setting up the Kerbal alarm. Giving myself a few more minutes warning than the standard 1 minute because it is an ion engine and it does require a lot of burn. But guess what? After all that work, I have the docking collar and the gas tank together. We are going to assemble this bad boy. Yeah, 2 giant pieces of space awesome. So, I'm going to rotate this sucker around. I'm going to do most of the maneuvering with the docking collar because it's a lot lighter and a little easier to maneuver. Plus the big rig truck ship that carries it has a little bit more RCS thrusters, so it's a little bit easier to maneuver it. Now I'm just pulling what fuel I have left in that gas tank out and then putting just a hair back so I can deorbit it and trash it. Because again, I don't want space junk. So, checking it, making sure, checking it. Now, I'm looking at this going, man, did I burn a lot of monoprop in this thing on the way out. Like I cleaned out a tank of a 750 tank worth of it. So that tells me that when you're moving heavy loads, sometimes they burn a lot. So anyways, turn it on, and boom, we go. It's gone. Now, I'm thinking about that RCS problem and the fact that I'm very low on monopropellant. And I'm hoping I can do it. And it gets a little close. I mean, I could always go back to the big tank, and try to maneuver it from there, but I'm just, really dreading that because of that wiggle in the back of that tank and the fact that, it would just be all over the place. It'd be such a pain. So I start turning on my RCS when I'm maneuvering, and then as soon as I get to my maneuvers to where I want them to be, I turn off the RCS so there isn't any slow bleed of it out or anything like that. And you can see here, like I'm just thrusting and thrusting, trying to get it to where it should be, and I mean it's slow, and that's because RCS or the SAS system is compensating for the fact that I'm spinning because the docking collar does not have any RCS push on the back of it. Therefore, all the RCS is way forward of the center of mass, and that's hard on the system. Like, I mean, it's gonna burn a lot of fuel stabilizing and trying to keep it under control, and I'm just like, sweating. And as you can see here, I'm moving toward it. I'm less than 100 monoprop at this point, and it's shut off because I don't want it bleeding out. I need it. This was a very slow docking for me. Very painful. Don't recommend it. And again, having to do compensation and doing slight course corrections because I'm traveling in the wrong direction. It was tough. While this is going here, I'll just talk about it. And I'm just finishing up this video. Like, it's currently the 17th of October. And Kerbal Space Program 0.22 with the science update is out. I've only taken a quick look at it. I haven't actually downloaded it yet. I've noticed a few people have checked into it, and yes, the save files aren't broken, so that's reassuring. However, the science stuff is part of the career mode, and since I'm building in sandbox mode, they're not interchangeable. So I will upgrade to 2.2 here right away. I will check to see if my mods still work, because if I don't have the same mod pack for some of these parts, as soon as I load the game, there's it'll just say part for ship not found, removing ship, and that could wipe out my entire space program. So we got to make sure that all the mods work before I switch over to 2.2. But however, in the meantime, if anyone's interested or wants me to do a let's play of the science stuff, maybe just send me a quick text or send me a comment or something in the YouTube thing, and I'll do it. I don't have too many people, so managing my small amount of subscribers and viewers is not a huge problem. If one of you's got a request, just let me know. So here we go, just getting closer. I'm burning that monoprop. It's getting low, trying to come in just right. And boy, yeah, I was worried about this one. This was quite a painful docking maneuver, rotating it so that it's lined up correctly, because I want these things to look nice with, symmetrical and whatnot, not off kilter. And we're coming in for the last little bit. Now all I need to do is just get the last bit sorted out. We're sitting at about 20 monoprop, 20 units of monoprop. It's hairy. I'm thinking I'm not going to have enough. I only got one shot at this. One shot, and that's it. If I miss, I got to switch to the gas can. And I don't want to do that. So if at the very least, if I could get this lined up just about right and give it enough of a push back, we should be fine. I'm not good enough to be using thrusters to dock with this giant unwieldy piece of equipment. And you could see that targeting reticle in the middle of the Navy fish is just bouncing all over the place. It's like, oy. So there we go. I'm doing the final push toward it. Less than 10 units of monoprop. Trying to conserve it as best I can. I don't want to come in too quick because I'll bounce off the other docking port and then I've got to compensate again. And I'm getting pulled off, and you know, we start wiggling and we're grinding, trying to get her stabilized. Like this was just, oh, this was nerve-wracking. And there, I'm out of monoprop. But they're touching, they're grinding, and they grab. We got her! Yay! That's shaving it close to the wire. So the first thing I do is fill the space tank, or fill the truck up with monoprop again, because I don't want to miss it. But that's also the end of the episode, guys. Next episode will be out as soon as I can. Again, keep in mind I've got a lot to do, so I can't be out right away. You guys have a great time. See you in the verse, and this is Scott Cook signing off.